Hey guys, Mr. Yisley here. Just want to get started on our Chapter D notes. So Chapter D is all about decimals. So as you did some research and learned a little bit about them and defined some of the vocabulary words that are associated with them, one of the big things you talked about was place value in that section. So place value has to deal directly with the spot that lines up in relation to the decimal point. So if I were to give you the number 43.65, the 4 would be in the tens spot, the 3 would be in the 1 spot, then we've got our decimal place, the 6 would be in the tenths spot, and the 5 would be in the hundredth spot. So this is just a nice little decimal place value chart just to remind you of how it all works. When we talk about place value, everything deals with starting with the decimal point, and if it's after the decimal point, it moves to the right and it deals with tenths, hundredths, 1,000ths, 10,000ths, so on and so forth. If it's to the left, it goes ones, tens, hundreds, 1,000s, 10,000s, so on and so forth. So I'm sure you know most of that. That should be a review from previous math courses you've taken. We also want to remind ourselves about rounding rules and how rounding rules work. So based on the place value that we're asked to round to, if they were to ask us to round to the tenths place value, we would want to look one place value to the right. So it's always going to be one place value to the right. So we would look over here with our number 43.65, and they asked us to round here to the tenths. We would look to the hundredths place there, right? And that would be a determinant for us, right? And we would determine if that number, the 6, was going to stay or if it's going to round up. Well, how we determine if it rounds up is if the number is 5 through 9. All right, so if this number is 5 through 9, all right, that's going to tell this 6 to bump up to a 7, which in this case it is. So this 6 would become a 7. The 6 will stay the same, all right, if the number were 0 through 4. So if there were a 0 through 4 here, or we didn't see a number at all in that hundredths place value, the 1 spot to the right, that would tell it to stay the same. But again, in this case, it's a 5, so that's going to tell the tenths to round up 1 spot. So this number, if we rounded it, would become 43.7. So if the place value being rounded, though, is a 9, so let's use a number. I'm going to put it right here below. Let's say it was 43.96. And again, they asked us to round to the tenths value. So if the place value right there was a 9, which this one happens to be, all right, we're going to again still go to the right and determine if it tells us to round up or round down or stay the same. If it's 0 through 4, we stay the same. Well, this number is 6, so it's in the 5 through 9, so that means we're going to round the 9 up. Well, there's no single digit number larger than 9, so that actually makes us have to bump it. So this number would become a 0. We would then round this one up 1, and then this one would stay the same. So our actual, when we rounded this, it would become 44.0 based on that information. So if the place value being rounded is a 9 and the place value to the right indicates it should round up, then the 9 becomes a 0 as it became, and the next place value to the left has 1 added to it. So the 3 became a 4. All right. If it were to have told us if this, instead of being 6, had been a 4, then it would have stayed the same, so we ended up with 43.9. So if there's a 9 in that spot that you're rounding, that's really important to recognize. Is it staying as a 9, or is it going to round up to a 0, and we're going to bump that, adding 1 to 1 spot over. All right, so let's take a look at a couple of examples here. So example A says round to the 1's place value, all right? Well, the 1's place value is the 6 right here. So even though there's 2 numbers after it, we only have to look 1 spot to the right. So I'm just looking at this 9, and that 9 says, hey, you need to round up. So that makes this 6 a 7. So my answer would be 7. Then we're going to round to the tens place value. The tens place value on this next one. Well, tens, if I look up at my chart, it's the next spot. So we're talking about this spot right here. So again, even though there's multiple numbers after it to the right, we're only looking one to the right. So I'm looking at this number right here. And I'm saying, hey, what does that tell it to do? Well, according to our rules, 0 through 4 says keep this one the same. So our rounded number would be 10. All right, next one says to round to the tenths place value. Well, according to that, the tenths place value is the first number to the right of the decimal. So that's going to be this one right here. So again, we look at the number to the right, and even though there's more than one number to the right, we only look at that one on the right. So once I do that, I'm then going to say, does it round up or stay the same? Well, 1 tells it to stay the same, so my rounded number would be 3.2. All right, well, I would encourage you to try example D on your own. So pause the video, check it out, see what you come up with for your answer, and then when you're done, check your answer against mine. So I'm going to continue forward with it, and when I look at this, it says round to the hundredths, and always look at these THs. That indicates that it's going to be the right to the decimal place. Well, the hundredths place value, according to that, is the second one. So I'm looking at this one right here, and I'm looking at it and saying, all right, what do I need to do? I need to look to the right at this number. And what does that tell me to do? Well, 5 through 9 say round up. So that means I'm going to round this up. Whoa, that's a 9 though, so we've got those special rules. So that's going to become a 0. So it's going to become 0. And then it's going to add 1 to the 7, so that's going to become an 8. And then everything else will stay the same. So 48.80. And the reason we have to keep that 0 instead of drop it off, which we would do in many cases, is because it asks us to round to the hundredths place. And this is what is actually in the hundredths place. All right, well, make sure you're paying attention to those place values. That decimal place value chart can be a huge help, so make sure that you're using that to your advantage.